So, yesterday we left off with the question where silk comes from. The answer is B. Silk is made from silk moth cocoons. They're cases which silk moth bugs hide in when they change from caterpillars into adult moths. Long ago, silk was all the rage. Rich ancient Romans couldn't get enough of the shiny stuff which was brought along the old Silk Road from China. But they hadn't a clue how silk was actually made. For thousands of years, the crafty Chinese kept silk making top secret. After all, silk was big business and they didn't want anyone else nabbing a share. And the Silk Road wasn't just useful for shifting silk. It was also a brilliant way for intrepid explorers to see more of the world. Bet you didn't know all of that. And here we see the Silk Road from where it went. A long and winding road. The old Silk Road wasn't a nice paved road like the ones you get today. This rocky route led through monstrous mountains, bone-dry desert, and plummeting river ravines. Worse still, it was guarded by bloodthirsty bandits who thought nothing of murdering merchants and other unwary travelers and stealing their money and goods. There they are, the bandits. So why on earth did a mild-mannered monk from China decide to follow this risky road? Well, you're about to find out. Horrible Geography Travelers' Tales for Xuan Zang. Some people think that Xuan Zang was the greatest Chinese explorer ever. He was also a brilliant student, and all his teachers reckoned he'd go very far, though perhaps not as far as India, where he is headed in 629 AD. It was actually his big brother who suggested the treacherous trip. But Xuanzang was keen to find out more about his Buddhist faith. Buddhism began in India in the 6th century BC. He wanted to bring some holy books home to translate from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language, into Chinese. Little did he think it would be 15 long years before he saw home again. Now here's an earth-shattering fact for you. Xuanzang was following in the footsteps of another meandering monk called Fa Hsien. He set out for India in 399 AD. When he got back to China, he wrote a thrilling book about his travels. He didn't want to write it at first. He was worried about setting a bad example. He said, "If I were to tell what has happened to me, then people of unstable mind might be tempted to take the same risks, reckless to their personal safety. For they would argue that I came back safe and sound, so these foolish persons would set about jeopardizing their lives in lands impossible to explore, and which only 1 in 10,000 men could hope to come out of alive." There he is. But even these wise words of warning didn't stop hardy Xuanzang. Almost at once, disaster struck. First, Xuanzang had to sneak out of China because he didn't have the emperor's permission to leave. In those days, you needed the emperor's say-so to just about anything. And then he headed west along the old Silk Road. Unfortunately, the guide he'd hired to lead him across the gruesome Gobi Desert deserted him. There was nothing but sand for miles and miles, and Xuanzang soon got hopelessly lost. There he is, lost in the desert. All he could do was plod on, alone except for his trusty old horse. Then things went from bad to worse. Xuanzang lost his water bag and nearly died of thirst. Bet he wished his brother had kept his big mouth shut. But just as he had hit rock bottom, Xuanzang had a stroke of luck. A local king took pity on him and sent the miserable monk on with another guide and a load of goodies for the journey. Eventually, Xuanzang reached India, where he spent the next 13 years. Like Faxian before him, he visited masses of Buddhist monasteries and holy sites, learned Sanskrit and Buddhist philosophy. I told you he was brainy. And collected loads of precious manuscript to take back to China. Sometime in 643 AD, Xuanzang headed north to start the long journey home. But if he thought it would be a dawdle compared to his journey there, he was wrong. Horribly wrong. If he'd kept a secret diary, it might have looked something like this. My Secret Diary by Xuanzang, not to be read by the emperor, sometime in 643 AD. What a disaster! I reached the river Indus safely, so far so good, but a storm blew up and almost capsized our little boat, and 50 of my best manuscripts and all the rare seeds I'd collected fell into the wretched river, never to be seen again. What's more, I've been given a pesky elephant to ride across the mountains. Apparently, it's a great honor, but I'm not so sure. It's an ugly-looking brute with a nasty glint in his eyes, and it never stops eating. I only wish I had drowned instead of my lovely books. Later, in 643 AD. I didn't mean it. So, about the elephant. If only I could take it back. Guess what? It's only gone and drowned, and it's all my fault. A few days ago, we were attacked by bandits. What a bunch. Not content with pinching our money, they wanted to throw me into the river as a sacrifice to the gods. I thought I was a goner. I really did, and then I had heard an enormous splash right behind me. The elephant was so freaked out it panicked and jumped into the river. Oh dear, where's my hanky? Homeward bound. Intrepid Xuanzang finally reached China in 645 AD. He traveled over 12,000 kilometers, a staggering feat with EA for the time. He brought back copies of hundreds of holy books. He had the lost ones copied again, and other souvenirs for his trip. In fact, he had so much luggage it took 20 horses to carry it all. The emperor gave Xuanzang a hero's welcome. He'd forgiven him for giving him the slip, and ordered him to write an official account of his amazing travels, as if Xuanzang hadn't got enough to do translating all those books. There he is. That's his route, right there. And he says, well, no, not he. Our guide here says, our next brave adventurer didn't set out to become an intrepid explorer. It was all the idea of his dear old dad. But like hardy Xuanzang, he got to know the old Silk Road very, very well. Our next explorer is plucky Marco Polo. Now this all happened a great deal later, so we're not going to get into it today. This is something we're going to look into tomorrow. If you have watched this video until the very end, my question for you today is, where do we know Marco Polo from? Do we know him from somewhere?